Hey, everyone, and welcome back. Data validation is something that we deal with as data engineers literally every day.
It really is.
And today,
Yeah.
we're going to do a deep dive into these slides from HESAP's data validation.
Oh, very cool.
These slides are great.
Yeah.
I think they really lay the groundwork for trustworthy data pipelines. And we're going to get into some, I think, really interesting stuff about data accuracy and completeness.
Absolutely.
Consistency, integrity.
Yeah, all the things.
All the core stuff that we care about.
It's easy to get really excited and just want to jump right in and start building these really cool data pipelines.
Right.
But if you don't have solid data validation,
Right.
it's like building a house on sand.
Yeah.
And so these slides actually do a really good job of going through and laying out like 8 key principles.
Okay.
So it's accuracy, completeness, consistency, integrity, compliance, automation, continuous monitoring, and documentation.
That's a pretty comprehensive list.
It is. It is.
It's almost like a checklist to make sure that you're not going to run into data disasters.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they're all interconnected, right? So they kind of build this framework for ensuring that the data systems that you build are reliable.
That makes sense. And I really liked actually how they highlighted the concept of completeness with this analogy of a cake.
Oh, yeah.
If you're missing some ingredients, things are not going to turn out the way you expected.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And that's similar with data, right?
Yeah.
If you have incomplete data, you're going to end up with a flawed analysis.
Yeah.
Which could lead to bad decisions.
Absolutely.
Which is something we all want to avoid.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially in such a data-driven world. Okay, so let's talk about accuracy first.
Okay.
So they define data accuracy as basically ensuring that the data is correct and adheres to the defined business rules and also reflects reality, which sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But I imagine actually checking for that requires a really systematic approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that you have to think about kind of from the beginning and all the way through the process.
Gotcha. So how do we go about checking for accuracy? So the slides mention something called VMO analysis.
Right.
And VMO stands for valid, invalid, missing, and outlier values.
Exactly.
It sounds like a really powerful way to kind of get a look at and identify trend and the proportions within your data.
Yes.
To really pinpoint where there might be inaccuracies.
Yeah, it's like a health check. You're going through and you're kind of getting a sense of, okay, what's going on in my data.
Okay.
And it helps you identify these potential issues pretty early on.
Okay, cool.
And something else to remember is that data accuracy needs to be considered at different levels, right?
Oh, okay.
So the slides talk about microdata, which is like the individual level data, and then macro data, which is like the summarized data.
Gotcha. So like zooming in and zooming out.
Yeah. Exactly. And they both offer you unique perspectives on data accuracy. So you need to do different types of checks, depending on if you're looking at that micro or the macro level.
Gotcha. So an outlier in microdata, for example, doesn't necessarily mean there's an error.
Right.
It just might require a little more investigation.
Exactly.
Looking into other related information.
Yeah. See if it makes sense.
To make sure it makes sense. Okay, cool. Now let's move on to completeness.
Okay.
Which we touched on briefly with the cake analogy.
Yeah.
So the slides go into a little more detail about how to actually assess for completeness.
Right.
So they talk about calculating the completeness ratio, looking at the percentage of missing values, and also doing field level checks.
Yes.
And then another thing that I thought was interesting is comparing completeness by data source.
That's an important one because, a lot of times in these big data environments, you're getting data from all over the place.
Right, exactly.
And so one of the sources could be the source of your problem for completeness.
Makes sense. So what are some of the key takeaways when it comes to ensuring data completeness?
Well, I think one of the big things is that you need to be doing both manual and automated checks. And that's especially important when you're dealing with just massive data sets.
Like huge volumes of data.
So the manual checks can really help you kind of understand the data, what's going on.
Yeah, get a better sense of it.
And then the automation can help you scale and make sure that you're checking everything.
Cool. Anything else?
I think, when you're trying to really ensure data completeness, you have to consider the context, the coverage, and consistency across all of your different sources.
So it's not just about having the data.
Yes.
It's about having the right data.
It's about having the right data. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Let's move on to data consistency. So the slides define this as basically ensuring that you have uniformity and standardized representation of the data across all the different systems and databases.
Exactly.
So they also highlighted that there are different types of consistency checks.
Right.
Pre-checks, post-checks, and real-time checks.
Yeah. And those are important because, as you can imagine,
Right.
in a really large data set,
Right.
trying to make sure that everything's consistent can be very difficult.
Right. And that makes sense because especially as you start scaling things up, you're going to run into challenges
Exactly.
with, scalability, complexity, and just the general
Human error.
human error.
Human error is a big one.
Yeah, for sure. So how can we make sure that we are effectively tackling these challenges when it comes to consistency?
So the slides talk about using automated checks with predefined rules so that you can catch these inconsistencies early on.
Okay.
They also recommend using these cross-validation techniques
Okay.
so that you can compare the data across different sources. Gotcha.
To make sure that it's consistent.
Makes sense.
And then, probably one of the most important things is to have really robust data governance frameworks.
Right. That makes sense because that kind of sets the standard for the whole
Exactly.
organization so that
Yeah. It minimizes any inconsistencies that come from miscommunication or, just general human error.
Absolutely. And that's crucial, especially when you have a large team. Everyone's working on different things and data is going everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Okay. So now I want to talk about data integrity.
Okay.
So this is a concept that I think is often used kind of interchangeably with some of the other data quality principles.
Right.
But I think it has its own distinct meaning.
It does. It's more like that overall
Yeah.
correctness, consistency, reliability of your data.
Like the glue that holds everything together.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the slides broke this down into 4 key elements.
Completeness, accuracy, consistency, and trustworthiness.
Yep, all of those have to be present
Yeah.
for your data to really be reliable.
So it's not just about one aspect of data quality.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the holistic picture of the
Yes.
data
It is.
to make sure that it's trustworthy.
Yeah.
From all angles.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what are some of the techniques that we can use to ensure this data integrity?
Well, the slides talk about a few things. So one is checksums,
Okay.
and these are great for detecting data corruption.
Okay.
Then there's input validation.
Mhm.
This prevents invalid data from getting into your system in the first place.
Okay.
Anomaly detection,
Right.
which can help identify these unusual patterns in your data that could indicate a problem.
Gotcha.
And then there's automated monitoring, and that's kind of keeping an eye on
Yeah.
data integrity over time.
To make sure it doesn't slip.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like having a data guardian ensuring that everything is as it should be.
Exactly.
And it seems like preventing data integrity failures is especially important when dealing with sensitive information, right?
Absolutely.
We're talking about things like preventing fraud,
Yeah.
securing data use,
Yeah.
and just really fostering trust in the data itself.
And that trust is so important, especially in today's digital age where data is really at the heart of everything.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about compliance,
Okay.
particularly in the context of like big data warehousing.
Right.
So the slides emphasize that aligning your data handling with all the different regulations like GDPR, CCPA, and HIPAA
Yep.
is absolutely crucial,
Yeah.
especially when dealing with sensitive data.
Absolutely. And non-compliance can have some pretty serious
Right.
legal and financial repercussions.
Exactly. So it's not something to take lightly.
Yeah. But it can be really challenging
Right.
to ensure compliance in these large data environments.
Right, especially with the volume and velocity of data.
Exactly.
So the slides break down the key components of compliance, and they are data mapping, discovery, classification,
Right.
access control,
Yeah.
monitoring, and then incident response planning.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a roadmap for navigating
Yeah.
the compliance landscape.
It is. It is.
And the first steps on that journey seem to be data mapping and discovery.
Yeah, they really are. So data mapping is like a blueprint.
Okay.
It provides this visual representation of how the data is flowing within your system.
Okay.
And then data discovery is focusing on really identifying
Yeah.
where that sensitive data actually resides.
So knowing your data inside and out.
Yeah.
Okay. So once we have a clear picture of our data landscape,
Yeah.
then we need to control
Yeah.
who has access to what data.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's where access control and monitoring come into play.
Okay.
And there are these techniques like role-based access control or RBAC, which basically ensures that only the authorized individuals can access certain data sets.
So like a security guard for your data.
Yeah, exactly.
Making sure that only the right people are getting in.
Yep.
Okay, and then just in case something goes wrong,
Right. Yeah.
despite all of these different measures,
Yeah.
the slides also stress the importance of having an incident response plan.
Yes, that is super important.
So tell me more about that.
Well, so basically you need to have this well-defined plan for what you're going to do
Right.
if there is a breach or a compliance failure.
Okay.
So it outlines those procedures for how you're going to contain the damage,
Mm-hmm.
how you're going to recover data, and how you're going to meet any regulatory reporting requirements.
So being prepared for the worst case scenario.
Exactly.
Okay. And then how about automation in all of this?
Right.
So the slides mentioned that while automation has huge potential, there are some challenges with implementing it,
Yeah.
particularly in these large data environments, especially when it comes to scaling and integration.
Right. Yeah, it's not a simple fix.
Right.
You have to plan it out. You have to have the right tools in place.
Mhm.
And then you have to have that robust data governance framework to really oversee the whole process.
Yeah.
So it's about strategically leveraging automation to enhance compliance efforts.
Right. So making sure you're choosing
Yeah.
the right tools and approaches for your specific needs
Yeah.
and your data environment.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, now let's get into kind of the practical side of data validation
Okay.
and talk about automation specifically. So the slides emphasize the
Awesome.
importance of automation,
Yeah.
especially as data sets continue to grow in size
Absolutely.
and complexity.
Yeah.
And I know this is a topic that resonates a lot with data engineers.
It does. Yeah.
So,
It's key for efficiency,
yeah.
for reducing errors,
right.
and really just improving the overall quality of your data.
Okay, so it seems like automation goes beyond just like the basic checks.
It does, yeah. So the slides talk about using these automated tools that leverage algorithms, like isolation forest and support vector machines. And these can help you detect a wider range of issues, including these anomalies that might slip through the cracks otherwise.
So almost like an intelligent assistant.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's constantly scrutinizing the data.
Yeah.
For any signs of trouble.
Exactly.
Cool. And then they also mentioned real-time validation.
Right.
Which sounds incredibly valuable for preventing errors from kind of cascading through the entire system.
Absolutely. Yeah. So instead of waiting until the end of the pipeline, you can actually catch those issues as the data is coming in.
Right.
That prevents those errors from propagating downstream.
Okay.
And potentially corrupting the whole system.
Gotcha. So nipping problems in the bud before they can spread. Okay, and to take automation even further, the slides discuss integrating machine learning.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is like a really big step towards intelligence within data validation.
It is. It's giving your data validation kind of that extra boost.
Okay, cool. So tell me a little more about that.
Well, so you can use machine learning to automate some of these more complex tasks that traditionally would have required manual intervention.
Gotcha.
So you can use it to identify irregularities.
Okay.
You can use it to impute missing values. And you can even use it to ensure that the data is consistent.
Right. So basically taking the human out of the loop a little bit.
Yeah.
Which frees them up to do other things.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. It sounds like machine learning is going to really revolutionize data validation.
It is. It is.
But as exciting as this all is, the slides also caution that automation isn't just a set it and forget it solution.
Right.
There are some key implementation strategies to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of those?
Well, first of all, you need to define what your validation rules are very clearly.
Right.
So you need to know what specific criteria your data needs to meet.
Okay.
Then you need to make sure you're selecting the right tools for the job.
Makes sense.
And then you need to make sure that you have that robust data governance framework in place to oversee the whole process, including the ongoing monitoring.
Right. So automation is a powerful tool.
Yes.
But it needs to be used strategically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
To really be effective.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so speaking of ongoing monitoring, the slides dedicated a whole section to continuous monitoring in big data. And it sounds like this is essential for making sure that we're staying on top of data quality in real time.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive.
Okay.
So you're identifying and addressing these potential issues before they become big problems, before they blow up.
Exactly.
Okay. So what are some of the techniques that we can use for this continuous monitoring?
So the slides talk about a few things. So one is real-time data profiling,
Okay.
automated checks,
Mm-hmm.
anomaly detection,
Right.
pipeline monitoring,
Okay.
and feedback loops.
So almost like a 24/7 health monitor for your data that's
Yeah.
constantly checking for any signs of trouble.
Exactly.
That's a great
Which
analogy.
makes
And it sounds like the slides don't stop there. They also talk about integrating AI and ML models
Yes.
for even more advanced monitoring capabilities.
Absolutely. So we're talking about things like predictive analytics,
Okay.
automated root cause analysis, dynamic thresholding,
Oh.
and intelligent alerting systems.
It's like having a team of
Yeah.
expert data analysts
Exactly.
working around the clock
Yeah.
to ensure the data quality.
Yeah, and it's really about moving from this reactive firefighting mode
Right.
to a proactive prevention mode.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that's a huge win for data engineers, right?
Absolutely. It frees up their time and
Yeah.
resources to
Right.
focus on other things.
More strategic things.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I want to touch on from these slides
Okay.
is documentation.
Right.
So the slides really emphasize the importance
They do
of
really.
thorough documentation
Yeah.
for transparency, accountability, and consistency
Mm-hmm.
within the data validation processes.
Yeah, and I know it's not the most glamorous part of
Right.
the job,
Yeah.
but it's crucial.
Absolutely. So why do you think documentation is so often overlooked?
Well, I think it's probably because it's not as exciting
Yeah.
as some of the other aspects,
Right.
but, it's vital for
Yeah.
making sure that everybody is on the same page
Right.
and that everybody knows what's going on.
Absolutely. So it provides that accountability.
Yeah,
It enables collaboration. It ensures reproducibility of your validation process.
exactly.
It allows you to track errors,
Yeah,
and it supports continuous improvement over time.
right. It's almost like having this detailed user manual for your data validation system
Right.
so that everybody knows how it works and how to maintain it.
Absolutely. So what exactly do we need to be documenting when it comes to data validation?
Well, the slides give you this pretty comprehensive list.
Okay.
So it's the validation rules, data sources, workflows, error handling procedures,
Okay.
data quality metrics, metadata, and audit trails.
It's a pretty long list.
It is. It's a long list.
Yeah.
But it's important.
Absolutely. And I think they also provided some best practices for documentation, right?
Yeah. So using standardized formats,
Okay.
keeping documentation up to date,
Right.
implementing version control,
Okay.
and making sure that it's accessible
Right.
to all the relevant stakeholders.
Yeah, that makes sense because if nobody can access it
Yeah.
or understand it,
Right.
it's basically useless.
It's useless, yeah.
So basically, these practices ensure that the documentation is going to remain useful
Yeah,
and relevant over time.
absolutely.
And the slides also included this really good example
Yep.
from the healthcare industry,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, so they talked about how, in healthcare, you often have these specific rules
Okay.
for things like unique patient IDs,
Right.
date of birth checks,
Mhm.
and very clear workflows
Okay.
with detailed error handling steps.
Gotcha.
And that level of detail is really essential for
Yeah.
ensuring patient privacy
Right.
and data integrity,
Absolutely.
especially in such a sensitive industry.
Okay, so now we're getting to, I think, the most exciting part of the slides.
Yes, the tools.
Which is the tools.
Yeah.
So they introduced a comparison
Yeah.
of 7
Mhm.
open source data validation tools
Yeah,
that I think are really useful for data engineers.
absolutely.
So we have Great Expectations, Pydantic Pandera,
Yeah.
Apache Griffin, Deek, Cerebrus, and OpenRefine.
And they're all open source, which is great
Oh, yeah.
because they're accessible to everybody.
Exactly. And I like that they focused on these 3 key features
Mhm.
for the comparison. So they looked at the primary focus of the tool,
Yep.
the programming language that it's
Yeah.
based on,
Yeah.
and whether the tool is specifically designed
Right.
for big data environments.
Yeah, which is important.
Right. So before we jump into the specifics of each tool,
Okay.
can you give us a quick overview of the popularity of these tools?
Sure. So Great Expectations is highly popular.
Okay.
Pydantic is very high.
Gotcha.
And then Pandera, Apache Griffin,
Mm-hmm.
Deek, Cerebrus, and OpenRefine are moderate.
Okay. That's a good starting point. So let's start with Great Expectations.
Okay. Yeah, so Great Expectations is primarily focused on data validation, as
Okay.
the name suggests,
Okay.
and it's based on Python,
Mm.
and it's specifically designed for big data.
Okay.
So it's a pretty popular choice, I think, for data engineers who are working with massive data sets. And you can basically define what your expectations are about
Okay.
your data
Gotcha.
and then test those expectations automatically.
So ensuring that the data quality is maintained
Yeah, exactly.
throughout the entire pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Python seems to be the language of choice for a lot of these tools. What about Pydantic?
Yeah, Pydantic is also Python-based,
Okay.
but it has kind of a slightly different focus.
Okay.
It's primarily focused on schema validation.
Okay.
So making sure that your data is structured the way you want it to be.
Gotcha.
And it's not specifically designed for big data,
Okay.
but it is very versatile
Wow.
and easy to use.
Yeah.
So it's really popular among data engineers.
Yeah, I can see why. So it's almost like having that blueprint
Exactly.
to your data and making sure that all the pieces kind of fit together as you expect them to.
Yeah.
What about Pandera?
So Pandera is also Python-based,
Right.
and it focuses specifically on data frame validation.
Okay.
So data frames are
Yeah.
kind of this fundamental data structure
Right.
in Python for data analysis and manipulation.
Right.
And Pandera basically provides a really powerful way to define and enforce data quality rules
Got it.
on those structures.
So if you're working with data frames in your pipelines,
Yeah,
then Pandera is
it's definitely worth checking out.
worth checking out. Okay. So we talked about a lot of Python-based tools.
Mhm.
Let's talk about something that's not Python-based. What about Apache Griffin?
Yeah, so Apache Griffin is Java-based,
Okay.
and it has a broader focus on data quality as a whole.
Okay.
So it can be used for different data quality tasks, including validation, cleansing, and monitoring.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of a multi-purpose tool
Yeah.
for managing data quality.
Makes sense. Okay. Let's venture into the world of Scala. What about Deek?
Deek, yes. So Deek is Scala-based,
Okay.
and it's designed specifically for Spark.
Okay.
And so Spark is a
Yeah.
popular distributed computing framework
Right.
for big data processing.
Yep.
And Deek's focus is really on
Wow.
ensuring Spark data quality.
Makes sense.
So it provides this really rich set of checks
Right.
and metrics that you can use
Yeah.
to integrate into your Spark pipelines.
Spark is a cornerstone of so many data architectures.
Yeah.
So a tool like Deek is really valuable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Let's jump back to Python. What about Cerebrus?
Yeah, so Cerebrus is another Python-based tool.
Okay.
And it's focused on data validation.
Okay.
It's like Great Expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike Great Expectations, it's not specifically designed for big data.
Gotcha.
So it's probably more suitable for smaller scale validation tasks.
Okay.
Or if you have a use case where you don't need the full power of these big data tools.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. And last but not least, we have OpenRefine.
Yeah, so OpenRefine is actually our second Java-based tool on the list.
Okay.
And it's different because its primary focus is on data cleaning
Oh.
and transformation.
Gotcha.
So it's a really powerful tool for tidying up messy data,
Yeah.
correcting inconsistencies,
Right.
and basically getting the data ready
Yeah.
for analysis.
So preparing the data.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So it's not strictly a validation tool,
Right.
but it does play a crucial role
Yeah.
in the overall data quality process.
Makes sense. Okay. So we've covered a range of open source tools,
Yeah.
each with their own unique strengths and focus areas. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like having this diverse toolkit at your disposal.
Exactly.
And you can pick and choose what makes the most sense for your use case
Yeah.
and for your data environment.
Yep.
I think it's also important to note
Yeah.
that as we kind of wrap up our discussion on data validation,
Mm-hmm.
that this is not a one-time task.
It is not.
This is something that we're going to have to pay attention to
Right.
constantly and continuously.
Absolutely. Yeah. It requires this ongoing attention, this adaptation, and really a commitment to quality.
It's almost like building a house. Right.
Exactly.
You don't just lay the foundation and walk away.
You don't.
You have to
It has to.
maintain it, make repairs,
Right.
and adapt to changing conditions
Yeah.
to ensure that it lasts.
Yeah. And data validation is the same. As our data landscapes are evolving and new
Yeah.
challenges are emerging,
Yeah.
we need to constantly be adapting our validation strategies and
Right.
approaches
And our tools.
and our tools.
Okay, cool. So as data continues to grow in volume and complexity,
Yeah.
what do you think the implications are for data validation?
Well, I think the importance of data validation is only going to grow.
Yeah.
It's no longer a nice to have. It's a must have
Right.
for any organization
Yeah.
that really relies on data.
Right. To drive decisions and achieve goals.
So data validation is the foundation
Yes.
of trust in data.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really good segue into our outro.
Okay.
So as we conclude our deep dive into data validation, we leave you with this thought. As data continues to grow exponentially, what new challenges and opportunities will emerge in the realm of data validation?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it's something that all data engineers should be thinking about.
Yeah.
As we move towards these increasingly complex data landscapes,
Right.
where data is streaming from everywhere
Yeah.
and all different kinds of formats,
Yeah.
our traditional methods of validation just might not be enough.
Right. They might not cut it anymore.
Yeah, we need to be exploring these more dynamic and adaptable approaches.
So what does that actually look like? What are some things that data engineers can start doing today to prepare for the future of data validation?
Well, one key area is really the integration of AI and ML, right? Which we talked about a little bit.
We did touch on it,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth emphasizing again.
Yeah.
Machine learning can really help automate these complex validation tasks and detect those anomalies
Right.
and even predict potential data quality issues
Before they even happen.
before they even happen.
That's incredible.
It is.
So it's almost like having this AI-powered
Yeah,
data quality guardian
exactly.
who's constantly learning and adapting
Yeah,
to the changes in the data.
absolutely.
What other areas do you think that data engineers should be focusing on?
Well, another really crucial area is data governance.
Yeah.
As these data ecosystems are becoming more distributed and interconnected,
Yeah.
it's really essential to have those clear data governance frameworks in place.
Right.
And that includes defining things like data ownership,
Mhm.
clear responsibilities,
Right.
and procedures for data validation and quality control across the entire organization.
Right. So it's not just about the tools.
It's not just about the tool.
It's about the people
Yeah.
and the processes.
Yeah. It's about fostering this culture of data quality
Yeah.
where everybody understands their role
Right.
in maintaining data integrity.
Absolutely. What else?
And lastly, I would say that data engineers really need to embrace continuous learning.
Right. Which is important in any profession.
It is.
You can't just stay stagnant.
No.
You have to keep learning
Yeah.
and growing and evolving.
Yeah, this field of data validation is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
There are new tools, new techniques, new best practices emerging all the time.
Yeah.
So staying up to date
Yeah.
with all the latest advancements is really crucial.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great point to end on.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the fundamental principles of data validation to the practical tools and techniques that data engineers can use.
Absolutely.
But I think the key takeaway here is that data validation is more than just a technical task.
It is.
It's really a mindset.
It's a mindset.
It's a commitment
Yeah.
to making sure that your data is accurate, reliable, and trustworthy.
Yeah.
It's about building a solid foundation
Absolutely.
for data-driven decisions.
And as we're navigating this increasingly data-driven world, that mindset is going to be more important than ever.
Absolutely. Data is only as good as the trust that we place in it.
Exactly.
And that trust starts with data validation.
It does.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive
You're welcome.
into data validation. We hope that you found it insightful,
Yeah.
and we encourage you to continue exploring these concepts further. Remember, building trust in your data starts with validation,
Absolutely.
and that's a journey worth embarking on.